Hi gang. So here we are on our first week of extended spring break, and today is Measurement and Make Monday. Boy, it's a lot of M's. So today I'm going to make some biscuits. I have my recipe right here, and you don't need to see all that stuff, but it's got my list of ingredients and my directions for what I'm supposed to do step by step. And I've got all my ingredients out here in front of me, and I've got a lot of measuring tools. And so I'm going to show you how I measure and why I pick different tools to do my measurement. Okay, so first thing I got to do is measure. This is a sifter, so I'm going to measure my flour into my sifter. So the first thing I use is a dry 1 cup measure. It says right on the handle that it's 1 cup. And this is really good for dry measuring because it has a flat top. And I'll show you how that works for me. Dip it right in there. I'm going to use the back of my knife just to make it settle in there. And then I can scrape it off. And I get exactly 1 cup measure. So I'll pour that in my sifter. And then I've got another cup. The directions call for 2.5 cups of flour. So I'm going to start out with my 2, and I can scrape that off, get a nice perfect 1 cup measure. Okay. Before I measure the rest of the flour, I'm going to add the other ingredients. So I have 2 spoons that I'm going to use to measure. You can see them right here. Different sizes. This is a bigger one, this is a smaller one. So the recipe calls for 2 tablespoons of baking powder, and so the bigger spoon, the bigger measuring spoon, is a tablespoon. And I remember, I can verify because it says right on there, it's 1 tablespoon. So here's my baking powder. One. And 2 tablespoons of baking powder. The next thing in the recipe calls for 1 teaspoon of sugar. Here's my sugar right here. And I'm measuring that. It's my smaller spoon, it's the teaspoon. And 1 teaspoon of salt. 1 teaspoon of salt. And I'm just going to shake that around and start sifting and add my last bit of flour. The flour is a 1/2 cup, so here's my 1/2 cup dry measure. It says right on the edge of the stem, 1/2 of a cup. So I'm going to fill it up, even it off, and add it to my sifter. The sifting actually helps to get out any particles of the flour or the mix that would make the dough coarse. And it helps to mix together those dry ingredients. That's why I like to use it. So all done with the sifter. And this mixture of dry ingredients goes into my food processor. Okay, the next step actually calls for, are those in the way? Okay, the next step actually calls for 8 tablespoons of butter. Now, the butter package, this is the wrapper that comes around a stick of butter, and it says right on the bottom edge of the wrapper how many tablespoons are in 1 stick of butter. And I need 8, and so it says 8 tablespoons right across there. We count them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 tablespoons in 1 stick of butter. So 1 stick of butter is all I need. And the recipe calls for cold butter, and what I found is that it works really well if it's frozen. So before I started the video, I chopped it up into cubes and I put it in the freezer. So here's my 8 tablespoons of cold butter. I'm going to put it right into the food processor with my flour mixture. So all we're going to try to do with this food processing step is we want to break up that hard butter and make kind of a lumpy mixture with the flour. And so it doesn't take very long, it's just a few pulses. The last thing for my biscuits, as far as ingredients goes, is buttermilk. So here I have buttermilk, and this is 1 pint. And we know from the land of gallon that every pint has how many cups? 2. So there are 2 cups of buttermilk in this container. And for a liquid, let me shake it up real good first. For a liquid, we use a different kind of measuring cup. This is a liquid measuring cup. You can use it for dry stuff, but it's a little bit hard to get perfect. So that's why I use the flat top measuring cups for dry stuff. So here's my buttermilk, and I'm going to measure 1 cup, and my 1 cup measure mark is right here. We know that 1 cup is also 8 ounces. And there I got 1 cup of buttermilk. So I just pour that into my mix. I've made these biscuits a few times and I know that I need a little bit of extra water to add for moisture. So I'm going to just rinse down the sides of my buttermilk here. And I'll just set that aside in case I need it. Probably will. Roll it out, and this is going to be my biscuit cutter, the open part of this cup. I choose this one for my cutter because at the end I'm going to use these biscuits to make sandwiches, breakfast sandwiches. And I put an egg and a piece of sausage on my sandwich, and the sausage is just about the same size as the opening for this cup. So I've already measured it with my sausage, and I know that this is the right size for me. So I make my dough in a loaf that's not quite as wide as the cup. And then I use my granite rolling pin, and I'm going to roll it out so it's about a ½ inch thick. How do I know when it's a ½ inch? Got any ideas? Well, some of you worked with me before spring break on some geometry measurement outside. We actually used our body to measure some of the things that we did in our measurement outside. And so most people have the tip of their finger, between the very end of their finger and the first knuckle, is 1 inch. So if I make my dough about half that thickness, that's about a ½ inch. And so that's a little bit thick right now. I'm going to roll it out a little bit more. This part's not really scientific, so if I don't get it exactly a ½ inch, that's okay. I don't have to measure this one really precisely. And now I'm just going to cut the recipe says for this size biscuits I should get between 6 and 8 biscuits. Well, that's 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Here's number 7. I'm just going to form this with my hands. There's 7 biscuits. Okay, Now, before we started, I preheated my oven, and it's at 425 degrees. And the recipe says that it should cook for 10 to 15 minutes. So I'm going to put these in the oven, and we'll come back when they're done. Okay, we're back. My timer just went off, so let's get them out of the oven. And there we go. Breakfast biscuits. Happy Make and Measure Monday. Measure and make. Happy Monday.